Welcome to Reddit Recap. Don't forget to subscribe. Reddit asks, doctors of Reddit, what is the most bizarre issue you've seen a patient trying to hide or mask? Do you have any medical conditions? No. What medications are you on? Proceeds to name at least 10 medications. From a nurse friend, guy came in with burns to his entire willy. He tried to say he got it by trying to shoplift a hot BBQ chicken from a deli down his pants. What he was really doing was fucking the chicken. Edit, what's with the McChicken comments? Edit to okay, I get it now. I will not be clicking on that link. Not sure if this counts as hiding, but a patient we recently had tried to play off a rampant staph infection as just some leg swelling. Turns out what he meant by that was he had a horrible infection in and around his genitals, something known as Fernie's gangrene. Do yourself a favor and don't Google that. The swelling had gotten so bad that his penis had literally inverted. He later told us that he had to pee with a 5-gallon bucket held up to his crotch because he no longer had any idea where the pee was going to go. Edit. Since so many people are asking what happened, he went to emergent surgery within hours, which is likely to be the first of many. Only way to get rid of an infection like that is debridement in the OR plus a shit ton of antibiotics. Somehow this guy had no systemic signs of infection, fever, low blood pressure, etc. So thankfully he should pull through. Last I heard he was likely to lose one of his testicles. But I don't believe they were going to have to remove his whole penis. I know it's fun to talk about how gross this stuff is, but it's a very serious type of infection. This guy's life was definitely in danger had he waited any longer. Not sure if this counts because I'm a pharmacist, but a patient came up to me and asked if there was gluten in cocaine because she has a gluten sensitivity. When I interned in the OB-GYN department, we had a lady sent to the ER due to vaginal bleeding. When she was examined, she had a massive vaginal tumor, the size of a football, growing between her legs. Her husband was with her. Both said that it had just appeared, and they never noticed before. There was absolutely no doubt that the thing had been growing for months. Sometimes when in shock, people can be in denial of the most absurd things. I was a medic in the army. I worked for a while in a clinic that only saw trainees. There is a spectrum that all trainees that came to our clinic fell on. Malingerers, and I'm fine, but they forced me to come. We saw much more of the former, but I'll never forget this one patient who was on the other end. He was forced to come in after an injury, if I remember correctly. He didn't want to miss any training, but as we were listening to him tell us about his ankle pain, the PA I was working with interrupted him and asked him if his throat hurt because he sounded like his throat was obstructed. He admitted it did, but was adamant he didn't want to miss training for a sore throat. We realized after looking at his throat he had an abscessed tonsil. I work in the lab, and the pathology department gets the foreign body items removed from a patient's body after surgery. Recent one was a chorizo sausage. Glad I wasn't there that day. A patient came in with chest pain. Said they'd fallen and hit their chest on a table. X-ray was performed to evaluate for a rib fracture or collapsed lung. The X-ray instead showed a long metallic foreign body in the left chest, within the heart. When questioned further, the patient admitted to lying, and that they'd actually shot themselves in the chest with a nail gun. The wound was not bleeding nor really noticeable. They were taken to the operating room and did quite well after open heart surgery. Not a doctor but an EMT. I had a guy who tried to tell us he fell while playing softball and hurt his ribs and arm. This was 10 o'clock at night. Come to find out, he tried to screw his drug dealer out of some money and the guy chased him down with a bat and beat him with it. So I guess he was kind of playing softball. A case of teenage pregnancy, where Madam Mama was present. Patient presented with amenorrhea and fatigue initially. Patient became visibly annoyed when the first test suggested is a pregnancy test. Patient and mother insisted that she never had sexual intercourse. Angrily, if I may add. Even when the test result turned back as positive. No. You quack. I'm telling you she never had no sex. Nurse here. I had a patient come in for a hip fracture. While helping her to the bathroom for the first time, the CNA noticed something hanging out of her vagina. Turns out, she walks around with a prolapsed uterus and thinks nothing of it. Not so much bizarre as clever. I drug tested a patient who should test positive for opiates as I prescribed them. We do that too. The urine looked totally normal but the test came back bizarre. Had an insanely high specific gravity, means there was a lot of stuff dissolved in it. Sample was positive for opiates but had zero confirmatory metabolites, what your body turns a drug into, in it. Otherwise test was totally normal. It took me a couple minutes to figure out how this was possible. The patient was selling their pills instead of taking them and didn't want to get caught. They crushed up the pill and put it into the urine. This made the test positive for opiates but because it had never gone through their body the testing machine found no metabolites. I use the case to find the smart med student in a group now lol. My late dad was a surgeon and, when he was a resident, had a middle-aged male patient come in complaining of pain in the rectum. They examined him and found a vibrator lodged fairly deep. When they asked him how it happened, he looked extremely surprised that it was there and then explained. I was lying in bed and it was on and vibrating on the bed near me. And it sort of moved on its own. Guess it found its way up my ass all by itself. Loved hearing emergency room stories from my dad and it sucks that he's not around to tell them these days. This entire thread is why I'm a veterinarian and not a physician. My god. An Elder Wand replica was stuck in his butt. Had to resist to ask whether he had tried AskReddit Wand. Not a doctor but a corrections officer. Had an inmate complain of pain in his penis. Took him to the facility hospital. He had screws jammed into his urethra. About 14 IQ. They took the screws out and put him on some psych meds. About a week later he cut his penis off with a broken mirror and flushed it down the toilet. The penis was never recovered. I once saw a high school age kid come in with a dinner candle stuck in his rectum. He reportedly was using it to reach an itch. Apparently the itch was in his spleen because that thing was deep. Mom told me the story. And how she had previously asked him to not itch himself with other things of hers. I didn't ask for any more details. I honestly think she believed that he was just really itchy. BTW. It prediction. Rectal foreign body stories. Lots of them. I used to work psych and we had this regular patient who we all knew quite well. Schizophrenia. Paranoid type. He was always complaining about spider eggs in his brains. One time, upon admission, he complained that his butt was hurting because he sent a rat up there to retrieve a message. Of course no one believed him. But we have to check anyway. Sure enough, there was a rat tail hanging out of his rectum. Patient's biggest concern was that he get the important message from the rat, who was dead, of course, and also non-verbal regardless. Oh, I have tons of weird stories. When I was a 4th year medical student, doing a rotation at the Veterans Administration Hospital, the patient came to the emergency room complaining of stomach pain. We did an x-ray, which showed 2 toothbrushes in his stomach. He explained to us that he had the sensation that there was something on the back of his throat, and used his toothbrush to try to get rid of it and accidentally swallowed the toothbrush. The same thing happened with the second one. We consulted gastroenterology, and the toothbrushes were removed via endoscopy. He was admitted to the hospital for observation overnight. The next morning he complained of stomach pain again. A follow-up x-ray revealed that he had swallowed his entire convenience kit at the hospital, including the small toothbrush, small tube of toothpaste, and even his plastic razor. Needless to say, we called psychiatry for consultation. It turns out this was not the first episode for this guy. He just liked to swallow things. Not hidden from us, but from her boyfriend. Came in with $9,000 in cash which he had wrapped in plastic and shoved up her hoo-hoo. Her vaginal acids disintegrated the plastic wrap and she had to be anesthetized to get it all out. It wasn't the patient, but his asshole relatives. They came into my office to ask me to see this old guy because he had accidentally cut himself and wanted some stitches. I told them I couldn't do any stitching, lack of sterile equipment. but would have been glad to apply some steri strips if the wound allowed it, as long as they brought the man in the office. Request denied. They kept insisting I see the man at home. Fine. I loaded up my bag to go check on the old fellow. I found him in his bed, conscious but refusing to talk, with various superficial knife wounds on his stomach and a gigantic hematoma in the process of swelling up on his forehead. I flipped my shit and got the relatives to finally talk. They said the man had fought with his sister and decided to self-harm by repeatedly slamming a hammer on his forehead. Had then tried to disembowel himself with a kitchen knife. They didn't call an ambulance because they were ashamed and didn't want to deal with assisting the man in a faraway hospital. I gave them 15 minutes to get their shit together and either call an ambulance or get the man to the hospital themselves. Never knew what became of him. I had a lecturer who told me about a homeless guy who regularly presented to ED claiming stomach pain. He would get an abdomen x-ray which showed a bunch of wire inside his abdo. He would be added to the next day's emergency theater list. Get a hot meal and a bed for the night before hooking it the next morning and self-discharging before surgery. He had purposefully pierced his belly with a wire coat hanger and fed the thing inside himself so he could go around to hospitals and score a free hotel room for the night. This is somewhere with universal healthcare, so even though he was a regular and the hospital staff knew him by name, they couldn't refuse treatment and couldn't force him to have the coat hanger removed either. My aunt is a family doctor, so patients come to her with symptoms and she directs them towards a specialist based on her diagnosis. One day an elderly husband and wife came into her office, and when asked why they had come in, the wife responded, "His foot has been smelling for a while and I finally convinced him to come have it looked at." My aunt, not hard smelling, concurred that his foot stunk. She asked him to remove his shoe and sock. When he removed his sock, the bone from his big toe fell out of his toe and onto the ground. Turned out he had a very bad case of gangrene that had eaten away the flesh of his toe. He knew something was wrong but was stubborn and didn't get it checked sooner. And my big toe hurts now after typing this. Sent a male patient into the bathroom to collect a urine sample. Took him much longer than expected. He misunderstood and gave a semen sample. My mother, the medical professional of our family, had a 13-year-old girl who was 9 months pregnant. In the midst of labor, dilated to 10 centimeters and crowning in the emergency tridge, swearing until she was black and blue that she was a virgin and that nobody knew what they were talking about. Her mother stood on the sidelines causing a commotion, demanding a real doctor make an appearance. Let's just say when the twins made an appearance 10 minutes later they were all singing a different tune. A 60YF came in after falling asleep and rolling on a pincushion. She had 3 2-inch needles in her left shoulder on x-ray. Later found out she had been trying self-acupuncture. My cousin told me about a patient who complained about her nipple falling off all the time. She said she tried to glue it back on or use skincare creams to have it stick to her breast. Turns out she had, not sure what stage anymore, probably pretty bad, breast cancer. From what I remember, the tumor got so big that the breast skin was stretched quite a bit. Somehow that plus friction led to an open, not healing and oozing wound which extended to her nipple. Well, nobody there understood how she didn't go to a DR or a hospital earlier. Keep in mind this happened in Germany. She had a job, health insurance and everything. Internal medicine ward outside of New York City. 55-year-old lady was mute in the ED, noted poor historian, but severely constipated, severe abdominal pain, needed rectal disimpaction and more than just an acute workup. So gets admitted reluctantly to surgery. Next morning on round she is talking a mile a minute, full of detail about her diet and symptoms and family, etc. Afternoon, back to mute. And back to abdominal pain and constipation. 2 more days, same pattern. Team is stumped. She is blown away that we can't figure out what is wrong with her. And we feel the same way. Labs, imaging, consult teams, all coming up empty. Strict ins and outs. Strict dietary restrictions. Everything we can think of. Janitor comes in by chance and is pissed he has to change the paper towel so many goddamn times in this one room. Seems like the whole floor is stealing them from her. Sure enough, PT has been consuming about 2,500 paper towels q 24 hours. Psych team comes for the obligatory consult. And of course she is mute. How do we get her to talk? One paper towel at a time. I think some poor intern got a paper out of that case. Hope she is doing well somewhere. Nurse here. One time had a patient come in with insane intestinal trauma. Had to have his colon stitched up. Said he was fishing and fell, his rectum just happened to fall perfectly on a fishing pole. Must have been a wild night to be fishing naked. Not a nurse, but my mom works with nurses who have crazy stories. Here's two of them. Both from ER nurses. A man came into the ER with a birthday candle in his penis. He had stuck it in there to surprise his girlfriend on her birthday, but when he lit it, the melted candle wax stuck to him. This is probably the weirdest one I've ever heard. An old woman came into the ER with a high fever, abdominal pain, dizziness, etc. She's showing signs of toxic shock syndrome, like when you leave a tampon in too long, so the doctor decides to check the woman to make sure nothing got stuck up there. Sure enough, she looks up there and half shits her pants when she sees two beady little eyes staring back at her. The doctor begins to pull it out, to which the old woman responds, "Put it back." Turns out the old woman, well past menopause, had gone to a bad witch doctor to help her get pregnant. Her recommendation: put her, now dead, turtle up there for a few days and she'd regain the ability to get pregnant. That's all for this video. You made it to the end. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing so you know when the next videos are released. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.